Hi
Hello,
everyone,
Adelaide.
welcome. Welcome. Hi Anne. It's the second time so that we are gathered for the Mobility Club 15 minutes talk. The concept is quite simple. We invite an expert every Wednesday and we ask him three questions. So thank you all for joining us today. Do not hesitate to introduce yourself on the chat tab. We have the chat tab on the right side. So in October, we've decided to explore the EV market. Of course, the global auto sales plunged during the COVID-19 crisis, but electric mobility remained remarkably resilient. So today, I'm really pleased to discuss with Anne Lehman. She's the ex-innovation manager at Blue SG, and she will share some market perspectives and car sharing specificities in Singapore. So, Anne, pandemic-related lockdowns and social distancing are having a severe impact on the mobility industry as consumers have stopped or significantly reduced travel. In your opinion, how COVID-19 affects or will affect car sharing in Singapore?
Yeah, actually, very surprisingly, during the lockdown, we saw a very high increase in the use of car sharing in Singapore. Typically, this was quite unexpected because since the people were forced to stay home and had no opportunity to go to work, typically we were expecting a significant reduction in usage. That being said, it's the very interesting outcome of this recent situation is we saw that people considered that public transport were highly dangerous. That was one. And second, that even the ride-hailing or even the taxi industry was considered as being a rather dangerous, sanitary speaking, transport mode, where the risk of virus transmission were rather high. And this is why the car share is a very interesting option for most commuters or many commuters. As a result, from a situation where the cars were rented out something like, I don't know, on average, 4 times a day, it increased to 18 times a day, just in the range in 4 to 5 months since April. So this mode of transport is considered as far safer in terms of virus transmission or exposure to potential virus or germs compared to other public transport modes. It is important to note, though, that the context in Singapore is that access to private car is very elite or very selective because the price of a private car is so expensive that owning its own car is not really an option for most of the people. So they basically had the choice between public transport or ride hailing or taxi hailing or car sharing. This is why it came up as a very interesting solution.
Thank you. So yes, at the end, the Singapore context really supports the adoption of car sharing, as at the end, shared mobility could pick up the slack from declines in public transportation, and also the accessibility to cars is really expensive. We have observed a few months ago the end of some contracts regarding operators regarding the electric car sharing market in France due to financial difficulties. So I would like to ask you, how do you ensure a car sharing scheme's long-term viability, and especially in Singapore?
Well, as I said, in Singapore, we have, so one thing very important to note is that indeed Singapore car sharing experiment, because in the first place, that was an experiment that was launched by Singapore Economic Development Board, coupled with the Ministry of Transportation. This is a very successful experiment in Singapore, but it is true, and especially if you compare it to other cities where Bolloré had car sharing operations as well, like Paris or Lyon, London, or even Los Angeles, Indianapolis. Why? Because, as I mentioned earlier, owning a car in Singapore is outrageously expensive. Just to give you an idea, To own a car, you must have a certificate of entitlement. This is called a COE, which is a permit to own a car. This COE cheapest cost is $45,000. With $45,000, you have the right to own a car, and then you buy a car, and then you pay 100% tax on top of the price of the car, and then only you can start all these measures are real deterrent for users to own a car, for commuters to own a car. Therefore, any other options become interesting as opposed to owning a car. So it is probably the answer at the end of the day for cities who wants to how to say reduce traffic jam or congestions, to adopt a very comprehensive mobility policy within the city, where owning a car, driving a car within a city will be the last resort for any commuter. This is typically why and how a car sharing option becomes sustainable within a city. Of course, this cannot, it is always in complement of public transport, ride hailing options, or even peer-to-peer car sharing. This as a complement of mobility for commuters.
Super clear. And now if we go in the backstage, I would say, of electric car sharing services, we all know that the EV values lies in battery management. What are the particularities of batteries life cycle in the car sharing sector?
Well, in the car sharing sector, you'll notice that the cars are used first, so significantly more than a private car. On average, a private car sleeps in the parking 85% of the time. A car sharing vehicle will be used roughly 60% of the time, which still leaves ample time for the car to recharge, right? It means that we are not talking about intensive use as opposed to taxi, ride hailing, or fleet or buses. Therefore, you can go for a solution where the car will be on charge quite often and regularly. If you think about it, whenever you are on a very intense use, it means that whenever your battery is empty, you have to be very quickly. With the traditional lithium-ion battery, the more you recharge the battery and the faster you charge the battery, the fastest, the shortest the battery lifespan is. As a consequence, using electric vehicle for intensive usage is not a technically or economically viable solution. In our fleet, the Bolloré fleet is using the first solid state battery, which has a very long life span with 100% capacity during the 8 to 9 years usage, which fits, I would say, the requirements of a car sharing usage. It is possible because the vehicles are in charge more or less 50% of the time, 40 to 50% of the time, especially at night. They're not used or very limitedly used. So the battery life cycle is I mean, the electric vehicle is a good, how to say, product, let's say, for car sharing as opposed to lithium-ion or as opposed to a thermal vehicle.
Okay, super interesting. I see that we have one question from Jens, who's located in Belgium at Skipper. He was asking, would this barrier to own a vehicle in Singapore always in place? So it seems to be. Do you have some insight on how it was put in place regarding the restrictions, the certificates, because it's not really a popular decision. So how was it put in place?
Sorry, the question is how was car
How was
sharing put in place in
yeah, how was
Singapore?
car restriction? How was it put in place?
So actually, the Bolloré actually won. There was actually a tender that was launched by Singapore. So two entities, the Land Transport Authority on one end, and which was backed by the Economic Development Board. It was a tender, a government tender. The purpose of that tender was to establish, to implement what they call a living lab experiment to measure the impact of car sharing on commuters' behavior and how could car sharing become an option or a complement of public transport policy within the city. So they simply launched a tender to which Bolloré, which was operating Autolib in Paris, replied, and it was won back in 2016 and deployed afterwards 2017. It covers 1,000 cars and 500 car sharing stations, meaning 2,000 charging points, with an operation for 10 years.
Okay. It seems that we have a few questions regarding the hydrogen. Do you think that hydrogen could compete with electromobility in car sharing? And are there any system with hydrogen car sharing schemes in Singapore?
So no, there is no system with hydrogen. So for now, hydrogen remains what they call a proof of concept vehicle. There is no, let's say, commercial scale or commercially available hydrogen vehicles sold here in Singapore. Would it become one day a competition to the current EVs? It is possible. Technically speaking, this would definitely be something that would make sense. Now, in terms of economic investment, there are so many investments made worldwide in EV from car manufacturers, from battery manufacturers, from charging point manufacturers, cities, countries, which deployed all these charging points. Typically, I would say there is a huge push and effort that has been put onto what I would call the traditional EV, electric vehicle, which is, I would say, one of the reasons, if not the reason why, it's going to be quite difficult for the vehicle to become an option that soon. Even though technically speaking it would, it's really a matter of economic interests.
Thank you very much, Anne. I think we have just 1 minute to take the last question before concluding. We are coming back to this sanitary crisis. What kind of decontamination procedures are in place between users, and what are the pain points regarding these procedures? It is a question from Total.
Yeah, so basically the decontamination procedure, so there are basically a few levels. First, Blue SG ran a campaign even before the lockdown, actually, to incite people to wipe the car. So in each cars, there were, and there are still actually, alcoholic wipes in the vehicle, as well as those gel. And there was a campaign, including onto the mobile app, saying, we remind you to wipe out the cars. This is all these things are placed into the vehicle for your perusal. One. Second, there were 2 minutes free rental given to any users to wipe out the car. And on top of that, the vehicles were more regularly disinfected with alcoholic cleaning products, as opposed to those which were more, dusting products. So alcoholic sprays were introduced into the regular cleaning of the car. But it was vastly left in the first place to the users themselves to disinfect the wheel, the seats, as and when they were taking up the car and returning the car, plus one daily cleaning. As you can imagine, it represents extra manpower, huge organization as well. So this was majorly operational challenges.
Sure. Thank you very much, Anne, for your intervention regarding long-term schemes viability, regarding the battery management. As a reminder, this event was part of the 15-minute talk we organized during October and November. It is part of the Mobility Club events. The Mobility Club is a private circle dedicated to global mobility players. So do not hesitate to drop us an email if you want more information regarding the club. And I invite you to join us next Wednesday. I will be pleased to complete my EV panel with Sophia Nadour, who is the electromobility lead at BP. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice day.
Thank you very much for your time. Have a nice day too.
Bye.